All right, so before we start reading the story Every Little Hurricane by Sherman Alexie, I want to go over three things real quick. First one, fact versus fiction. Fact, nonfiction stories, things that are real, things that are true, things that are measurable, things that have happened, things that are verifiable, news stories, journal articles, reports, things like that. Now, those are good to get information. We can Google everything all day long about the difficulties of Native American life on reservations, the alcoholism, the suicide rates, the poverty, the homelessness, the diabetes, all these other things. And that is measurable and that is real and it's informational. But fiction, a story sometimes helps us connect because it is emotional, it is relatable, and it's based in reality. So this story we're going to read, Every Little Hurricane, features a 9-year-old boy, Victor, and a story through his eyes. And it's going to deal with all the violence, the alcoholism, everything else we've already learned about. But we're going to see it through the eyes of a little boy. And it's going to become real, and it's become emotional, and it's going to help us understand what that feels like for a child. And here's the thing, it's based on real life. Sherman Alexie grew up on a reservation. All these characters are very, very closely related to his parents, to his friends, to his aunts and uncles, and this may very well have happened to some detail like we read it. He is blurring fact and fiction to give us things that are real and measurable and emotional, but to give us in a relatable way. So fact versus fiction, even though it's a made up story, it's rooted in the truth. The second thing I want to talk about that is important for this story is the bicentennial. So the bicentennial, 1976, America celebrated its bicentennial, 200 years as a nation. And for the entire year, we had parades, we had fireworks, we had red, white, and blue, wagons and cowboys, everything America 24/7 celebrating, woohoo, 200 years of manifest destiny. While this was a great celebration for the country, it was not a great celebration for the Native Americans. This year-long celebration reminded them repeatedly of losing their land, losing their culture, losing their way of life, and a series of atrocities that had been committed against them, their forefathers, and to them to this day on reservations. So this story takes place on New Year's Eve, 1976, the New Year's Eve of this great big American celebration. So while it seems like the Native Americans are having this great celebration, this party, it's really a somber occasion. And you need to understand that kind of in the background. All right, another thing I want to go over real quick with you guys is metaphor. So a lot of you understand metaphor, you've learned about metaphor, but when I bring it up, the one thing you guys often go is, oh yeah, metaphors don't have like or as. Similes have like or as. And that's good, but I really want you to understand what a metaphor is and why it's used. So metaphors are when you compare to the unreal for greater impact. So I could say, my son's bedroom is messy. He's got clothes on the floor. He's got a half-eaten pizza sitting on a plate. It needs to be cleaned. Or I could say, my son's room is a pigsty. It looks like a barn in here. So that comparison has greater impact by making it relatable to something else we might see to understand the emotional connections or the exaggerated connections. So that's what metaphors are used for. Metaphors are really used to create with words a visual expression or a visual comparison for us in our heads and therefore in our hearts as well. So in this story, Every Little Hurricane, our main character, Victor, the 9-year-old boy, is constantly comparing, using the metaphor of storms to the problems of real life. He talks about hurricanes, he talks about thunder and lightning, he talks about heavy rain. All of those are constantly back and forth related to alcoholism, to violence, to poverty. That's supposed to be an empty wallet. And up here, you can't see it. It's a tear coming down an eye, hopelessness. So as you read this, it's kind of weird because he's talking about the moment of the party, then all of a sudden he's talking about some storm, and it weaves in and out in kind of a weird way. Well, this is also part of the Native American oral tradition, storytelling tradition, where they use things, visual metaphors to compare and represent. They also use humor in ways to show pain and sorrow and sadness. So there's some great tradition of Native American storytelling embedded in this story as well. So as it kind of moves between the real and the unreal, it can be a little confusing, but understand this is a 9-year-old boy trying to process all of his struggles by comparing them to storms that come in, blow in, destroy, and devastate. So with that, let's start Every Little Hurricane by Sherman Alexie.